I always thought delivering food was the simplest gig until the night I drove to the abandoned Route 66 motel. I had always considered myself a simple guy with simple ambitions. At 25, I wasn't looking to change the world or chase after something grand. All I wanted was to keep things steady. Working as a delivery driver for Wendy's had its perks: free food, flexible hours, and time to myself on the road. It was late September, a time of year when the days began to grow shorter, and the nights seemed to stretch longer than ever. That evening, my shift had been uneventful. I pulled up to the drive-through window, collected orders, and dropped them off at scattered apartments in suburban homes. The city was quieter at night, which suited me fine. The dark never bothered me until that night. It started with an order that came in just before midnight. The address was unfamiliar, a place on the outskirts of town near the old highway. I squinted at the screen, seeing that the location was marked as Route 66 Motel. I knew that place was abandoned, or at least I thought it was. Everyone in the area had heard stories about the old motel, the kind that fueled small-town gossip. Some said it had been closed for decades after a string of disappearances. Others claimed it was haunted. I had always dismissed those rumors, thinking they were just exaggerated tales to scare tourists. But tonight, for the first time, I had to go there. As I punched the address into my GPS. Just another delivery, I muttered to myself, brushing away the unease. I pulled out of the Wendy's parking lot and headed toward the outskirts of town. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional flickering streetlight or the distant howl of a dog. My car headlights illuminated the narrow, winding road ahead, casting long shadows on the trees that lined the highway. The GPS voice interrupted the silence. "Turn left in 1 mile." I glanced around, noticing that the road was completely isolated. It had been years since I'd driven this far out of town. The Route 66 motel came into view, its sign hanging crookedly from one hinge, barely lit by a single buzzing neon light. The parking lot was empty, weeds growing through the cracks in the pavement. The motel itself was a crumbling wreck, windows broken, doors hanging and slightly open, and the faint smell of mildew in the air. "This can't be right," I whispered, gripping the steering wheel tightly. My phone vibrated, indicating a new message. "Customer, just leave it by room 13. No need to knock." I stared at the message. I felt uneasy, but ignored it. I scanned the motel, spotting a rusty plaque near the building. The numbers were faded, but room 13 was on the far end, almost completely shrouded in darkness. As I pulled up to the room, I hesitated for a moment before grabbing the bag of food from the passenger seat. The air was thick and still, the kind of silence that made me want to leave as soon as possible. I walked toward the door, eyes darting around the desolate surroundings. The door to room 13 was slightly open, creaking in the light breeze. With a deep breath, I placed the food bag down and turned to leave when something caught my eye. A shadow moved inside the room, just beyond the door frame. I froze, my heart racing. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination or if someone or something was in there. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from inside the room, followed by a low, guttural moan. I jumped back, adrenaline flooding my system. I stumbled toward my car, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Without thinking, I hopped in and slammed the door shut, my hands trembling as I turned the key in the ignition. The car engine roared to life, and I peeled out of the parking lot. As I sped down the highway, I tried to calm my racing heart. "It's just an old building," I told myself. "Probably a squatter or some animals inside." But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the image of the shadow, lurking in the darkness. The moan had sounded too human, and yet not. After driving a few miles, my phone buzzed again. Reluctantly, I glanced at the screen. "Customer, you didn't knock." My blood ran cold. I had left without knocking, sure, but the message's tone felt wrong, almost accusatory. My thumb hovered over the phone, debating whether to respond. But then another message came in. I see you. Come back." I slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt in the middle of the highway. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. "How can they see me?" I muttered, panic rising in my throat. There was no one on the road. I looked back at the motel, but it was now a distant silhouette in the rearview mirror, shrouded in darkness. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, despite being turned off. Static filled the car, followed by distorted whispers. My heart pounded in my chest. I turned the volume knob, but it wouldn't shut off. The voices grew louder, incoherent but unmistakably sinister. And then, over the static, I heard a faint voice. "Ryan." It was my name, spoken slowly, deliberately. Terrified, I floored the gas pedal and sped off, not caring about the speed limit or the deserted roads. I had to get as far away as possible. But no matter how fast I drove, the voices persisted. The radio continued calling my name. After what felt like an eternity, I reached the outskirts of town. The lights of the city were a welcome relief, and the radio finally fell silent. I pulled over into the parking lot of a 24-hour gas station, my hands still shaking. I turned the car off, breathing heavily, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Pulling out my phone, I checked the messages again. The conversation thread with the customer was gone. No messages, no call history, nothing. It was as if it had never happened. I stared at the phone in disbelief. Was it all some kind of sick prank? I rubbed my eyes, exhaustion and fear clouding my thoughts. I debated going back to Wendy's to explain what had happened, but who would believe me? A haunted motel, strange voices. I'd sound insane. Just then, a knock on my window startled me. I whipped around, expecting the worst. But it was just an older man, probably the gas station attendant. I rolled down the window, my nerves still frayed. "Hey, you all right, kid?" the man asked, peering into the car. I nodded, still catching my breath. Yeah, just had a rough delivery." The attendant gave me a knowing look, as if he'd heard it all before. "Delivering out by the old Route 66 motel, huh?" I froze. "How'd you know?" The man chuckled, shaking his head. "You're not the first one to come through here looking spooked after a trip out there. That place, it ain't right. They say folks who go there don't come back the same." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" The attendant's expression darkened. "People disappear out there. Or worse. If I were you, I'd forget about that place. Act like tonight never happened." I wanted to ask more, but the man had already started walking away, disappearing back into the gas station. Sitting in my car, I stared at the highway stretching out into the night. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I whispered to myself, "Just another delivery," and I drove away, whispering to myself never to come back. I had been working from home for Wendy's customer support for nearly a year. It was a gig that offered me the freedom to work in my pajamas, the convenience of being close to my fridge, and the satisfaction of helping customers solve their issues. I enjoyed the job, even if it had its ups and downs. Most of the time I felt secure in my routine, but today would change everything. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon. The sun streamed through the window of my small home office, illuminating the clutter of empty coffee cups and crumpled notes scattered around. The faint sound of traffic drifted in from outside, a constant reminder of the world beyond my four walls. I leaned back in my chair, eyes scanning through customer tickets while I absent-mindedly munched on a bag of chips. Just as I was about to respond to a particularly complicated inquiry about an order mix-up, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text message from an unknown number. Frowning, I picked it up, half expecting some spam about extended warranties or a new pizza deal. But the message scared me. "I know where you live. You should watch your back." I blinked, trying to process the message. Who was this? What did they want? I felt the sudden urge to dismiss it as a prank, but my gut suggested otherwise. I glanced at the number. It was one I didn't recognize, and the profile picture was blank. Ignoring the slight tremor in my hands, I texted back, hoping it would be enough to scare off the sender. "Who is this? Stop texting me." I didn't have to wait long for a response. "You shouldn't have ignored my first warning. You have no idea what I'm capable of." A rush of adrenaline coursed through me. I sat up straighter in my chair, my heart racing. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, as if a storm were brewing just outside. I quickly glanced around my home office, the walls closing in on me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. This was ridiculous, I thought. It had to be some kid trying to get a rise out of me. I knew I shouldn't let it get to me, but the words felt like a weight pressing on my chest. Trying to shake off the unease, I returned to my work, forcing myself to focus on the next ticket. But the sensation of being watched lingered, gnawing at me like a persistent itch. Minutes turned into hours, and as the sun dipped lower in the sky, my anxiety only intensified. I wanted to call someone, my friend Jake, maybe, but I didn't want to sound paranoid. What if this was nothing? What if I made a big deal out of something that was just a harmless joke? My phone buzzed again, snapping me back to reality. It was another message from the unknown number. "Are you scared? You should be. You have one chance to make things right." This time the message made my skin crawl. The threat felt serious, and I could almost hear the whispering voice behind the screen. I needed to take it seriously. I opened a new browser tab, searching for information on how to report harassment, but before I could dive deeper, another message arrived. "Meet me at the park. Midnight. Or else." A rush of fear gripped me. The thought of going to the park, especially at midnight, filled me with dread. I couldn't just ignore it. What if this person was serious? What if they had already made plans to harm me? The scenario played out in my mind like a horror movie, each possibility more terrifying than the last. After a moment of hesitation, I typed out a reply. "Why are you doing this? What do you want?" For several minutes, the silence felt deafening. I was beginning to think the person had given up, when my phone buzzed again. "You'll find out soon enough. Just remember, I'm always watching." I dropped the phone on the desk and ran a hand through my hair, trying to catch my breath. Panic clawed at my insides. The idea of calling the police crossed my mind. But what would I tell them? A stranger was texting me, menacing messages. It felt silly, but as the sun slipped behind the horizon and darkness enveloped my home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. The clock ticked closer to midnight, and I found myself pacing the floor, unable to sit still. Every sound outside made me jump, every car passing, every rustle of the wind against the trees. I needed to make a decision. Should I go to the park or stay put? What was the worst that could happen? Finally, driven by fear and curiosity, I grabbed my jacket, slipped on my shoes, and headed for the door. The park was only a 10-minute walk away, and I hoped that maybe, just maybe, confronting this person would put an end to the madness. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap. I pulled my jacket tighter around myself, the shadows of the streetlights creating strange shapes on the pavement. The path to the park felt longer than usual, each step heavy with dread. The world felt quiet, almost too quiet. When I arrived at the park, my heart raced as I scanned the area. The moonlight illuminated the empty benches and the winding paths, but there was no sign of anyone waiting for me. Taking a deep breath, I stepped further into the park, trying to stay calm. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky in the stillness. "Is anyone there?" The only response was the rustling of leaves in the trees above. I felt like an idiot. Perhaps this was all a joke after all. But just as I turned to leave, I heard a sound, a faint chuckle echoing through the darkness. "Nice of you to join me," said a voice, low and menacing. I froze, adrenaline flooding my system. I turned slowly, eyes searching for the source. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and cloaked in darkness, their face obscured by the hood of a jacket. Panic surged through me. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice trembling. The figure stepped closer, the moonlight illuminating their face. To my surprise, it was someone I recognized, Eric, a former coworker from Wendy's who had left the job months ago under strange circumstances. "Eric?" I asked, disbelief washing over me. "What the hell is going on?" Eric chuckled, an unsettling sound. "You think you can just ignore me? Leave me behind like I was nothing?" My heart raced. I didn't ignore you. You just left. What do you want from me? Eric took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. You're living your life while I'm stuck in the shadows. You have everything, your job, your friends, your freedom. I just wanted to remind you that I'm still here. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what Eric was saying. This is insane. You're threatening me over nothing. Nothing, Eric echoed, taking another step. You think you can just walk away? This is about more than just us. It's about loyalty. Before I could respond, Eric lunged forward, but I was quick, dodging to the side and sprinting back toward the exit of the park. I could hear Eric's footsteps pounding behind me, the sound echoing through the still night. Fear propelled me forward, every muscle in my body screaming to run faster. I dashed through the park, racing toward the safety of the streetlights. Just as I reached the edge of the park, I glanced back. Eric was close, but he stumbled slightly, giving me a precious moment to escape. Bursting onto the street, I frantically waved my arms at a passing car. The vehicle screeched to a halt, the driver's eyes wide with confusion. Without thinking, I yanked open the door and jumped inside. Drive! Just go! I shouted, my voice hoarse with fear. The driver, a bewildered woman, nodded and pressed the gas pedal, pulling away from the park. I glanced back, but Eric was nowhere in sight. The adrenaline began to wear off, leaving me shaking and breathless. As the car sped away, I recounted everything to the woman, who listened with wide eyes, occasionally glancing at me in the rearview mirror. When we finally reached a well-lit area, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Thank you, I said, my voice trembling. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stopped. The woman nodded, still looking concerned. You need to report this. People like that don't just go away. I remember that night like it was yesterday. My name's Evan, and I had a pretty regular day at work. I'm an office guy, papers, emails, meetings, nothing fancy. Anyway, after a long, tiring day, I decided to grab dinner at Wendy's. It was already pretty late. Must have been around 9:30 p.m., and I was starving. Wendy's was usually my go-to for a quick bite. When I got there, something felt off. The place looked weirdly empty. Not just, it's late, so no one's here kind of empty, but like, wrong empty. The lights inside were flickering, like they couldn't make up their mind whether to stay on or give up. Chairs were scattered around, and some tables looked like someone had flipped them over. It was messy, which was odd because this Wendy's was always neat and clean. I walked inside, calling out, "Hey, anyone here?" But no one answered. I figured maybe the staff was in the back cleaning up or something. I didn't think too much of it at first, just chalked it up to a slow night, and maybe a couple of clumsy customers before me. I made my way to the counter and waited. Nothing. I was about to leave when I heard a loud crash from the kitchen. It sounded like a tray of dishes had hit the floor. Then, a muffled scream. My heart skipped a beat. That's when I realized something wasn't right. Something was really wrong. I took a few steps back, my eyes darting around the restaurant. My mind raced. What was going on? Did someone slip and fall back there? Was someone hurt? But that scream wasn't just from someone slipping. It was like someone was scared, really scared. I started to walk towards the kitchen to see what was going on, but then I saw it. A shadow. No, not just a shadow, a person. Tall, hunched over, moving slowly from one corner of the kitchen to the other. And then I saw something in their hand, a knife. The glint of the blade under the flickering lights sent a chill down my spine. I froze. My brain was telling me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I crouched down behind a row of booths near the counter, trying to figure out what to do. I could hear footsteps now, slow and steady, like whoever was there was searching for something. Or someone. I peeked through a tiny gap between the booth and the wall. The figure was moving through the kitchen, their heads swiveling, looking around like they were hunting for someone, or something. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure the person could hear it. Then I noticed something else. 2 people. They were huddled together, behind a counter, shaking. Employees, I figured. One was a tall guy with messy black hair and a name tag that said Tony. The other was a younger woman, maybe around my age, with blonde hair tied back. Her name tag said Lila. They looked terrified. Suddenly, the figure stopped. The person's head snapped in my direction, like they sensed someone was watching. I ducked down again, my heart racing. I was out of time. I had to do something. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a metal tray that had been left on one of the booths, and tossed it across the floor toward the other side of the restaurant. The tray clattered loudly, skidding along the floor. The figure turned sharply and bolted toward the noise. I motioned to Tony and Lila to run, and they didn't hesitate. They scrambled out from behind the counter and made a dash for the back exit. I followed as fast as I could, hoping we could all get out before that maniac with the knife realized we were escaping. But just as we reached the back door, we heard the sound of glass shattering. I looked back. The figure had smashed one of the windows near the front and was now chasing after us. I could see that face now, wild, wide-eyed, like someone who had completely lost it. They screamed, and that sound, it was pure rage. We stumbled outside, and I spotted a car parked nearby, a beat-up old sedan. Tony had the keys and was fumbling with them, his hands shaking. Come on, come on, Lila urged, her voice trembling. The figure was getting closer, the knife glinting in their hand as they charged at us. Finally, Tony got the door open. We practically threw ourselves into the car. I jumped into the back seat, Lila in the front and Tony behind the wheel. The engine roared to life, and just as the figure reached the car, they slammed the knife against the driver's side window. The glass cracked, but didn't break. Tony hit the gas, and we sped off, leaving the figure standing there, screaming into the night. For a few minutes, none of us said anything. We were just breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. My mind was spinning. Who was that person? Why were they after us? Should we call the police? I finally asked, breaking the silence. Lila nodded, still shaking, and Tony just stared straight ahead, his knuckles white, on the steering wheel. We pulled over a few blocks away, and I grabbed my phone, dialing 911. As I spoke to the operator, explaining what had happened, I couldn't shake the image of that figure from my mind. The way they moved, the way they looked at us, like we were prey. And that scream will haunt me forever. That night was the scariest night of my life. We were lucky to get out of there. I work as a part-time janitor at a high school. It's not a glamorous job, but it pays the bills and gives me plenty of time to think. I'm a pretty quiet person. My routine is simple. Every day after school, I clock in, mop the floors, scrub the desks, and wipe the windows. It's peaceful in a way. The only sounds I hear are my own footsteps and the squeak of the mop. But something happened recently, something that still gives me chills. It all started one Thursday evening. I just finished my shift and was ready to head home when I got this sudden craving for Wendy's. I don't usually go out to eat after work, but that day, the thought of a burger and fries sounded perfect. So I hopped in my old car and headed toward what I thought was the closest Wendy's. It was weird because I didn't remember there being one nearby, but I was tired and my mind was foggy. When I saw the familiar red sign with the smiling girl, I didn't question it. The parking lot was empty, which was strange, but I didn't think too much of it. It was late after all. I walked inside and the place felt off. It was very quiet. No music, no customers, just the sound of the fryer bubbling in the back and the faint hum of the air conditioner. There was a cashier at the counter, a teenage girl, maybe a few years older than me. Her name tag said Rachel, and she didn't smile or greet me, just stood there, staring as I ordered my meal. It felt a little weird, but I shrugged it off. Maybe she was just having a bad day. I sat down by the window and started eating. The fries were hot, the burger was juicy, but the whole time I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The lights above flickered every now and then, and the air smelled stale, like the place hadn't been cleaned in ages. I looked back at Rachel, still standing behind the counter, her eyes following me. I finished my meal quickly and got out of there, not wanting to hang around any longer. The next day, I told my friend Jake about the weird Wendy's. Jake's one of those guys who knows every fast food joint in town. If there's a place to get burgers or fries, he's been there. But when I mentioned Wendy's, he looked at me like I was crazy. "Dude, there's no Wendy's in that area," he said, shaking his head. "Closest one is like 10 miles from here." I laughed it off, thinking he was messing with me. "No way, man. I was there last night. It's like 5 minutes from the school." Jake didn't laugh. "I'm serious. There's nothing like that around here. I've lived here my whole life." That made me stop. Jake wouldn't lie about something like that. I pulled out my phone, trying to find the location of the Wendy's I'd been to. But when I searched for it, nothing came up. It was like the place didn't exist. At that point, I started to feel a little uneasy. Maybe I'd just been tired and gone to some random restaurant that looked like a Wendy's, but the thought wouldn't leave me alone. I had to go back and check. The next night, after another long shift at the school, I drove the same route, determined to find the place again. It wasn't long before I saw the red sign up ahead, glowing faintly in the darkness. My heart pounded in my chest. There it was, Wendy's. But something was different this time. The parking lot was overgrown with weeds. The windows were cracked, and the sign was barely lit. It looked like the place had been abandoned for years. I got out of my car, my legs shaking as I walked toward the door. The door creaked open as I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. It was musty, like old rotting food. The tables were covered in dust, and the floor was littered with broken glass and wrappers. The place looked nothing like it had the night before. I glanced toward the counter, and that's when I saw her, Rachel, the same girl who had taken my order. But something was wrong with her. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. She wasn't moving, just standing there like she was frozen in time. My heart raced as I took a step back, my instincts screaming at me to run. Suddenly, her head snapped toward me. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice cracking like it hadn't been used in years. I froze, my throat dry. What do you mean?" "This place, it's cursed," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No one comes here. Not anymore. You need to leave before it finds you." "Before what finds me?" I asked, my voice shaking, but she didn't answer. Instead, she pointed to the back of the restaurant, where the kitchen doors were. A cold wind blew through the room, even though the doors had been closed behind me. My skin prickled with fear. I turned and bolted for the door. My hands fumbled as I pushed it open, the hinges creaking louder than before. As I ran to my car, I felt something behind me, like the shadows were stretching and reaching out, trying to pull me back. I didn't look. I didn't dare. I just threw myself into the car, slammed the door, and peeled out of the parking lot as fast as I could. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away, my heart pounding in my chest. When I finally pulled over, I sat there, breathing heavily, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't explain it. I hadn't imagined it. The Wendy's had been real, the girl had been real, or at least she had seemed real. I didn't go back after that. I tried to forget about it, but the memory haunted me. I'd see that red sign in my dreams, Rachel's pale face staring back at me, warning me to leave before something terrible happened. And every now and then, when I drive past that part of town, I swear I can still see it. The abandoned Wendy's, hidden in the shadows, waiting for someone else to walk through its doors. I'm David, and this happened when my family and I had just moved into a new apartment. After years of saving up, we finally found a cozy place that felt like home. The walls were freshly painted in cheerful colors, and the rooms were spacious enough for my wife, Nicole, our 2 kids, Brenda and Brandon, and me. I remember Brenda, our 8-year-old with the brightest smile and endless energy. jumping from room to room, her laughter filling the air. Brandon, our 5-year-old, always eager to play and explore, followed her around, pretending to be a superhero. "Look at my room!" Brenda squealed, twirling in the middle of her new space. Brandon was just as excited, running in and out of the closets like they were magical portals. It was a beautiful day filled with sunshine and new beginnings. After settling in, we decided to go shopping for furniture and some essentials. Nicole and I thought it would be fun to let Brenda and Brandon pick out some items for their rooms. We all hopped into our car, singing silly songs as we drove to the store. Brenda wanted a pink lamp shaped like a unicorn, and Brandon insisted on a big, soft teddy bear. As we wandered through the aisles, picking out things like couches, tables, and pillows, the kids bounced with excitement, sharing their dreams of how they wanted to decorate their new spaces. I smiled, feeling grateful for this family time. After hours of shopping, our stomachs began to rumble. "What should we eat?" I asked, glancing at Nicole. She looked as tired as I felt, but we both knew we needed a good meal. "Let's go to Wendy's," Brenda exclaimed, her eyes sparkling at the thought of their famous Frosties. "Yay, Frosties!" Brandon cheered, bouncing in his seat. Nicole and I exchanged amused looks. Wendy's was a favorite treat for the kids, so we agreed. When we arrived at Wendy's, I noticed something strange. The parking lot was empty, and the restaurant felt unusually quiet. "That's odd," I thought, glancing at Nicole, who shrugged with a smile. "Maybe it's just a quiet night." As we entered, we were greeted by 2 employees, a friendly girl with bright red hair and a tired-looking man who seemed to be dragging his feet. The red-haired girl smiled and waved at us, while the man glanced our way, but didn't say much. "Welcome to Wendy's," the girl chirped, but I could sense a nervousness in her voice. We walked to the counter and placed our orders, my unease growing with every moment. I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing above us, and the restaurant felt heavy with silence, like the air had thickened. As I turned to grab a table, I noticed the man leaning against the wall, rubbing his temples, clearly exhausted. We settled into a booth, and I glanced around. "It feels quiet," I said, trying to shake off the uncomfortable feeling. As we waited for our food, I watched the flickering lights above us. Brenda and Brandon were busy playing with the menus, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The silence was unsettling. I tried to distract myself by looking at the menu again, but the words blurred together as my mind raced. Finally, our food arrived, but my heart sank when I saw the cold fries and the cheeseburger that looked like it had been sitting out for too long. "This doesn't look right," I muttered, taking a cautious bite. It tasted spoiled. Brenda and Brandon grimaced at their meals too. "Yuck, Dad," Brenda whined, pushing her burger away. "I want Frosty." Feeling frustrated, I called over the red-haired girl. "Excuse me, can we speak to the manager?" I asked, trying to keep my tone friendly. She nodded, but her eyes looked worried as she scurried away. A moment later, the manager arrived, a tall woman with a stern expression that made me uneasy. She looked at me with cold eyes. "What seems to be the problem?" she asked, crossing her arms. I explained how our food was cold and unsatisfactory, hoping she would help. Instead, she dismissed my complaint as if it didn't matter. Suddenly, in a shocking moment, the manager slapped the red-haired employee right in front of us. I couldn't believe what I just witnessed. "What's wrong with you?" she yelled, berating the girl for something I didn't understand. My heart raced as I felt a surge of anger. "Hey, that's not okay," I shouted, standing up. "You can't treat your employees like that." Nicole, sensing the escalating situation, quickly pulled out her phone and called the police. "We need help," she whispered urgently, explaining the abusive scene to the dispatcher. I could see the red-haired girl trembling, her hands shaking as she looked at me. With wide eyes, the manager, now furious, grabbed a stick from behind the counter. "You'll regret this," she threatened, aiming it at the employees. The tension in the room felt thick enough to slice, and my heart raced. "Just leave them alone," I yelled, stepping forward. I couldn't believe the chaos unfolding around us. Brenda and Brandon huddled close to Nicole, their eyes wide with fear. Just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get any worse, Two police officers burst through the door. They quickly assessed the chaotic scene, their eyes scanning the room for trouble. "Step away from the employees," one officer shouted, taking control of the situation. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as the manager was handcuffed, still claiming she hadn't done anything wrong. Once the manager was outside, the red-haired girl broke down in tears. "I can't believe this happened," she sobbed, her hands covering her face. The tired man walked over, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, trying to comfort her. The paramedics arrived soon after, checking on the employees, but they both declined help, saying they were just shaken. I felt a wave of compassion for them. They didn't deserve to be treated that way. Feeling the ongoing distress in the restaurant, I turned to my family. "Let's go," I said gently. We didn't want to stay in a place filled with so much tension. As we walked out, I glanced back and saw the manager being loaded into a police car, still shouting that she hadn't done anything wrong. I was a man of simple tastes, and those tastes revolved entirely around Wendy's. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I feasted on the fast food chain's offerings with unrelenting enthusiasm. I had been a loyal customer since my college days, when my budget necessitated quick, affordable meals. But even as my income grew, my passion for Wendy's never went away. I loved everything about it, the crispness of the fries, the juicy burgers, and the delightfully frosty that was the perfect end to any meal. On most days, I would stroll into the bright red and yellow building, my mind already set on a spicy chicken sandwich and a side of fries. I knew the staff by name, and they greeted me with knowing smiles. "The usual?" they would ask, and I would nod, my mouth watering at the thought of that crispy, salty goodness. One overcast afternoon, after a particularly grueling week at work, I decided to treat myself to a larger feast than usual. I ordered a double cheeseburger, large fries, and a vanilla frosty. As I sat in the booth, savoring each bite, I noticed something strange about the fries. They looked slightly different than usual, thinner perhaps, but I didn't pay much mind to it at the time. Maybe they're experimenting with new recipes. I mused, shrugging off the thought as I dug into my meal. The first fry tasted divine, as always. But as I ate, I noticed a faint aftertaste that I couldn't quite identify. It was subtle, but unsettling enough to make me pause. "Everything all right?" A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. It was Diane, the friendly cashier who always remembered my order. "Yeah, just... these fries taste a bit different today," I replied, giving her a half-hearted smile. "Really? I haven't heard anything about a change," she said, tilting her head slightly. "But they do come from different batches, you know." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I finished my meal and went home, the unease gnawing at me. That night, I dreamt of fries. Golden, crispy fries danced around my head, whispering secrets in a language I couldn't understand. The next day, I returned to Wendy's, hoping that the fries would be back to their usual flavor. I ordered the same meal and sat down, but the moment I bit into the fries, I was struck again by that peculiar aftertaste. It was as if they were infused with something I couldn't quite place. "Are you sure everything's all right?" Diane asked as she came over to refill my drink. "I'm just not sure about the fries," I admitted, frustration creeping into my voice. "They taste strange." She frowned slightly. "You're not the first to mention it. I'll let the manager know." As the day went on, I found it harder to concentrate at work. The taste lingered in my mind, haunting me. I kept imagining the fries. Maybe I was overreacting, but there was a nagging suspicion in the back of my mind. One evening, I stumbled across an online forum dedicated to fast food enthusiasts. I hesitated before posting my concern. Has anyone noticed anything unusual about Wendy's fries lately? They taste different." Within hours, replies flooded in. Most users dismissed my claims, chalking it up to personal preference or perhaps a bad batch. But a few others echoed my sentiments. They described similar experiences, their own fries tasting odd, almost metallic. One user, whose screen name was Fry Phantom, even claimed to have conducted an investigation. Their fries are made from potatoes that are treated with strange chemicals. Fry Phantom wrote, I suspect they're using a new supplier. We should find out more. Intrigued, I exchanged messages with the user. We arranged to meet at a Wendy's location later that week to discuss our findings. The prospect of uncovering a conspiracy thrilled me and terrified me in equal measure. On the day of the meeting, I arrived early, my heart racing with excitement and anxiety. I spotted a tall figure in a hooded sweatshirt sitting at the far end of the restaurant, his face obscured by shadows. Fry Phantom? I asked, approaching cautiously. The figure nodded and gestured for me to sit. I'm glad you could make it, he said, his voice low. I've been investigating Wendy's fries for a while now. I've come across some disturbing information. I leaned in, eager to hear more. What do you mean? There are rumors that the company has been experimenting with additives in their fries, Fry Phantom said, looking around as if checking for eavesdroppers. They're trying to create a unique flavor profile to compete with other fast food chains. But some of those additives are, well, let's just say they aren't safe. Safe? I echoed, my stomach sinking. What do you mean? I can't say for sure, but I found a few reports that suggest they're using chemicals that can alter taste, but also have side effects. There have been complaints from employees, but they're too scared to come forward, Fry Phantom revealed. So you think these strange fries could be dangerous? I can't be sure without more evidence, but it's definitely worth investigating further, Fry Phantom said. We could get a sample and have it tested. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, thinking of the fries, the odd aftertaste, and the chilling conversation with Fry Phantom. My love for Wendy's had turned into a twisted obsession, and I felt as though I was standing on the precipice of a dark secret. The next day I returned to Wendy's with a plan. I discreetly ordered a large fries, pretending to enjoy the familiar taste, but this time I was armed with a small container. I carefully placed a few fries into it, masking my actions with casual indifference. After leaving the restaurant, I contacted a local lab to analyze the fries. The process took a few days, but I could hardly concentrate on anything else. I felt like a detective, unraveling a mystery that could shatter my world. Finally, the lab called me back. Mr. Adam? The lab technician said, his voice serious. We've completed the analysis of the fries you sent us. You need to come in. When I arrived at the lab, the technician sat me down. The fries contain several additives that aren't typically used in food production. Some of them are banned in many countries due to health concerns. It's clear they're altering the recipe, but it's unknown why. My heart raced as I absorbed the news. You mean they're dangerous? I can't say definitively that they're harmful without long-term studies, but the presence of these additives is alarming. The technician replied, You should report this to the health department immediately. Returning home, I felt a mix of dread and determination. I had to take action. I spent the next few hours crafting a detailed report, outlining everything I had learned about the fries and the additives. After submitting it to the health department, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. But the unease remained. Weeks passed, and I kept a close eye on the news, waiting for any mention of an investigation into Wendy's fries. One day, I caught wind of a scandal brewing. Reports emerged that several Wendy's locations were being investigated due to numerous customer complaints about unusual taste and potential health risks. I celebrated in a subdued way. I had uncovered the truth, but the thrill of victory was tainted by the knowledge that something I loved was now gone. Thanks for watching and sharing this story with us. If you have a story like this one, feel free to submit it via email mentioned in the description. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing content. See you in the next video.